Hello, everypony. It's Lotus Moon. I want to apologize for all of the subpar readings I've released so far. I had a foam board wrapped around my mic to try dulling out the city noise, but that only served to dull my voice as well. And I deeply do apologize for that. So I'm trying something else for the time being. I did order myself an appropriate sound box, but it's going to take a little time to get to me. So once that comes, I should be able to start using it immediately and hopefully bring you much clearer recordings. For right now, it's time I bring to you the next chapter to Fireteam Odium. This chapter, well, hopefully things turn out a little bit better for the ponies as well as for our fire team. Without further ado, please enjoy. Fireteam Odium, written by Atranos the Last. Chapter 11, Refuge. The Vogue's eyes widen at the pony's words, not expecting them to be so open to him. Quickly, he gathered himself and stood tall before addressing the new pony. As I previously mentioned, we come in peace. We have been banished from our legion and are looking for somewhere to stay while we figure out where to go next. I understand if you decline, but I ask that you at least consider our situation. The pony tilted its head before responding. And why should we open our doors to you? We heard about what happened in Manhattan. Well, perhaps we could be of aid to you. If you need something built or moved that you are unable to complete on your own, we are strong enough to do so. I am also a reasonably good strategist and can create plans even outside of combat movements. Smiling, the pony responded quickly. I appreciate the gesture, but we would have no need for something like that. However, I am not one to turn away ponies that are in need of help. If you are being truthful and you will not cause trouble in our town, I am open to accepting you into the town. The Vogue sighed in relief and relaxed his stance, turning to the soldiers beside him. Stand down. They are permitting us to stay, he commanded. The various Cabal foot soldiers nodded and stowed their weapons, following their leader's relaxed stance. When they had visibly stood down, the ponies also calmed. The shield remained around their town, but the Vol doubted that it would stay there for much longer. Please follow me, the pony said, beginning to walk away towards the town. Indigo Tornado, one of the many cults within the town, was hiding in his home with his mother. When he got back home from the meeting with the elders, his mother refused to leave the house for fear that he may have been hurt by the monsters. Mom, where's Dad? He asked. His mother had been staying as close as possible to him, continually at the ready to run should they have to. He's outside the shield with the mages, she replied, her eyes locked on the window. Indigo paused for a moment before speaking once again. Will he be okay? As long as the war mages are okay, he will be too. The colt gave a nod and settled himself down beside his mother, letting out a yawn. His classes had fairly odd times, normally finishing in the early hours. The teachers believed that teaching at nighttime was a better time to do so, as there was little to disturb the students. Adapting to the times was easy for anyone that went there, but dealing with the oncoming exhaustion was a little more difficult. Before he could close his eyes for sleep, however, a shadow passed on one of the windows, brought his attention up. The mare beside him had also noticed it and was watching it with fear-filled eyes. "Inigo, stay close," she whispered, standing up and creeping over to the window. Inigo did as he was told and followed behind her, his eyes only just peeking up above the windowsill. Outside, a group of creatures were being led through the streets by Elder Shine. The pony was smiling as she spoke with them. The creatures were huge, walking on two legs. They all wore armor of varying mass. The one at the front wearing the most. Its armor made it almost 3 times the size of the smaller ones that trailed behind it. "What are they, Mom?" he asked quietly. "I don't know, but make sure you stay near me. Okay, honey?" she said in response, backing up slightly. The colt gave a murmur, if confirming and pressing himself against the mare's side, fear truly seeping in at his mother's words. Outside, the commotion was beginning to settle as the creatures passed by. Crying and ponies calling for others could be heard, but there was little screaming or shouting. The lack of noise was almost like music to the pony and her colt, as it signified that they were finally safe. "Okay, honey, I need you to..." The mare was cut off by a new amplified voice coming from the square. "Ponies of Despectus, I come bearing good news. The beings you saw me entering the town with are not here to harm us. They are simply looking for refuge while they find a place to settle. I ask that you all treat them the same way you would treat any new guest, and if you don't like it, bring it up with the elders. That will be all." Indigo's mother had a look of shock adorning her face as she listened to the news. She quickly stood tall and looked down to her son. "I'm going to find your father. Just stay here, okay?" The little Pegasus nodded with a frown, unsure as to what was going on. He accepted a hug from his mother and watched as she galloped from the home, leaving him all alone. Sighing, he sat down and looked out of the windows. The ponies outside were just beginning to calm, the words from their elder seemingly being enough to stop their panic. "Be quick, Mom," he whispered, looking out at the fading shield that covered the town. "Are you absolutely sure this craft is safe?" "Ma'am, I wouldn't bring you aboard if I thought you were in danger," Exodus said, exasperated. The War Mage's leader had been fairly problematic since she had boarded, quickly finding out she was timid around technology, especially if it moved fast. "I understand that, but what if it crashes?" she asked. She was sitting between 2 other mages and had her head on a constant swivel. The galliot had many flashing lights across the inner portions of it, leading it to be distracting to those who had never been on board. She and her guard were not the only mages on board. About 14 ponies also sat, though they were completely silent. They all seemed to be watching for signs of attack, leaving Exodus with the assumption that they still did not trust him, even after what they did within the city. Breeze, Lemon, and Chrome were on board Curvis's ship with another load of mages. They had decided it wasn't a good idea to keep them on the same craft as the war mages in case of an attack. It won't, but if it even started to do so, my ghost would move you to safety before you were harmed, the warlock explained, focusing his attention on the radars in front of him. His explanation appeared to calm the pony somewhat, ending her questions there. Her silence was nothing bad to the Guardian, as it meant he could fly the ship without distraction. While his ghost did most of the flying, it was his job to keep an eye on the instruments and early warning systems. The next few minutes consisted of the warlock watching monitors while the ponies behind him sat either straight or watching EXO or looking around the cabin at the flashing boards and screens. Just as Exodus was beginning to relax, however, a voice pierced through the silence. "New target, moving into formation behind us," Curvis called out, drawing attention to the newer blips on their radars. There wasn't many, but they were far larger than any of the organic beings they had seen thus far. "Hostiles?" Exodus asked. "Not sure, but I don't really want to find out," Callus commented, her ship flying faster in an attempt to gain distance from the new guests. "I have to agree, we can't fight with all these ponies on board. How far are we from the destination?" Curvis questioned. "Too far." Exodus was about to speak up when he was cut off by another voice, one he didn't recognize. "Guardians, we know you are carrying animals with a great level of power. We ask that you give them to us willingly." The voice was deep, and there was grunting in the background, which gave the answer as to who it was that was chasing them. "You really think we're going to just hand over these ponies?" "Fuck you," Callus said. Her ship slowed greatly as she said this, falling back behind the other two. "This is your only opportunity to end this without conflict. Give them to us willingly or suffer," the voice commanded. "We'll see about that," Callus muttered, cutting off her comms. "Exodus, we may have to use Plan B," Curvis said, with the sound of the mic cutting out was heard. "I hear you. Good luck out there." "Same to you." The warlock stood and turned to his ghost. "I need you to shift me on top of the ship. Keep flying as fast as you can and drop the ponies at the town. When you've done that, pull the ship back and pick us up." The little machine nodded and turned invisible, following out the commands he was given. Only moments later, the EXO felt the familiar signs of a teleport, not flinching as the scenery changed to that of the surface of his ship. He had to hold on to prevent himself from being flung off before he was ready, though his mechanical hands had no issue keeping a tight hold on the metal. As he clung to the ship, he noticed Callus's ship not far behind him. The hunter had clearly decided to use the same tactic Exodus had used and was standing on top of her Inquisitor, watching the Cabal ship closely. When the Galliot got close enough to the enemy ship, he let go, using his light to slow him down slightly and glide until he reached the front plating of the craft. The impact was heavy, but did little to harm the warlock. He managed to get a hold of a gap within his armor, allowing him to hang from it without worrying about falling off. "Callus, you there?" he asked over his short-range comms. "You joining in on the fun?" the hunter asked in response. You could say that. Reaching into his light reserves, he began compiling energy into a ball, leaving plenty for any fighting he may have to do afterwards. When enough light had been gathered, he projected it into his hands. The ball sparkled with energy against the deep black that made up the majority of it. Hey, Callus, you remember the Crucible? How could I forget it? I learned a little something from it. Turning, he hit the plating of the ship with it, the light melting its way through it with ease. And what would that be? Exodus didn't respond right away, instead working on setting the ball of light up. When it had stopped moving as much, he allowed his light to temporarily fill him. Cutting it off as quickly as it had started, he moved whatever light remained outside his reserves into his hand. You may want to hold on, he advised before slamming his charged hand into the ball, the action creating a huge explosion that decimated the ship's armor. He had nearly been flung away by it. His ghost managed to teleport him onto the upper hull of the machine. The hell was that? Callus exclaimed, letting Exodus know she had made it out of the blast unharmed. I'll explain it later. We have bigger things to worry about. The blast had almost entirely brought down the ship. One of its engines was giving out huge plumes of smoke, and liquid of a variety of colors poured from the hole, most of them likely being coolants. This thing won't be chasing the other down any time soon. Meet you on the other one? Exodus asked. He hadn't seen his partner as of yet, but he had a feeling that would change soon. Fine by me, but I want this one. The warlock chuckled at that. All yours. Seeing no reason to stay, the two guardians leaped off of the hull, using their light to keep them in the air. The other Cabal ship had been flying some distance from the first, likely dropping back when it noticed the smoke. The distance was a slight struggle for Callus, but Exodus had no difficulty keeping his light running for long enough. Soon enough, they had directed themselves towards the craft long enough to hit the surface of it, letting them put themselves up onto the top. So, you got a plan? Exodus asked the hunter. They were both standing beside each other now, easily able to communicate via comms and hand signals. Yeah, though it's not gonna be as flashy as your method, she replied, throwing her hand up into the air. As she did so, her body became shrouded in solar energy. As soon as the energy coursed through her body, her golden gun appeared in her hand with a flash of light. Without waiting for a remark, she dropped her arm and took aim at one of the nearby engines, firing a single shot into it. The shot did far more damage than the warlock expected, leaving a huge gaping hole and a cloud of smoke. As quickly as the first, she turned and took aim twice more, firing off the remaining shots into two more engines. The ship, now flying with just a single engine, began its descent without pause, a screaming noise coming from the overstressed machine. I think that's our cue to leave, Callus said, jumping backwards and allowing her momentum to carry her away. Agreed, Exodus commented, doing the same as her. As they free fell, they watched as the craft fell from the sky, hitting the ground with a new explosion. The fall meant little to the two Exos, as their light slowed them to a near stop before they hit the ground. When their feet hit the ground, Callus moved to survey the wreckage, picking off any cabal that survived. Exodus, meanwhile, turned and spoke with his ghost. "How far is the galley from the destination?" he asked. "Not far, only 100 miles. Should reach it in about 20 minutes. Then we have some waiting to do." The time spent waiting was mostly silent. Both the guardians had their own ways of occupying themselves. Callus was looking over her weapons, tweaking their upgrades to make them slightly more efficient. Exodus, on the other hand, had been practicing his storm trance. The ability was a more recently learned skill for him, and he hadn't quite mastered its use. As a practice, he had set up pieces of metal from the crash in different areas and was trying to melt them all before his ability drained. The activity was fairly taxing on his light, but it was no issue to the Exo. His chest plate had enough light stored for a few self-resurrects, leaving him confident in his own skills to fight off any attacks should they show up. "Hey, Exodus, you mind talking about something?" Callus asked during one of the warlock's breaks. "Sure. What was it you wanted to speak about?" "When are we going to work on getting home? I get these ponies need help and are probably the best they are at going to get. But are we going to go back?" "Of course," Exodus said without pause. "I know it's difficult to be so far from the traveler, and Curvis knows that too. However, we are needed here. As warriors for the traveler, it's our duty to defend it and our home. While I would love to return home, these cabal pose a threat to not only this planet, but ourselves as well. We need to stop them before they can pull off what they came to do, even if we die doing so." "Yeah, but if we found a way home, we could get reinforcements. We don't necessarily have to do this alone." "Callus, look what these cabal have managed to do in just 48 hours. They have decimated a large city, kidnapped a huge amount of ponies, and threatened every living being on this planet. All for what? So a few million soldiers couldn't go home? If we stop for even a second, they will gain the upper hand. We have to focus on the bigger picture right now. But maybe when they have weakened slightly, can we look for a way back?" The hunter nodded slightly, going back to her weapons. Exodus understood what Callus was going through, but wasn't sure how to talk with her about it. Warlocks were the most connected to the traveler, and any changes to it could be felt strongly by the warlock that had been living for even a few months. A sudden loss of something he had bonded with was far more difficult than anything he had felt before, but he had done little to express it. The energy around them fueled whatever light they had lost, and while the traveler's presence was no longer available, he felt solace in the knowledge that what he was doing saved more lives than the city could ever hold. They continued their distractions in silence after that, neither of them knowing how to continue. It was Exodus's ghost that broke the silence. "Our ships are nearby. Shouldn't be more than a minute." Callus stood from her seated position when she heard the news, walking over to the warlock as he lowered himself from his hovering position. "Here's hoping Curvis got the ponies back okay," she commented, standing beside her companion. "We shouldn't have much to worry about. He's the most experienced out of the three of us for a reason, Exodus responded, watching as two ships came into view. The engines of the two crafts roared across the land around them, signifying their speed to return to their pilots. When they got into teleporting range, they slowed to hover above the two guardians. "See you at the town," Callus said as her ghost teleported her into the Inquisitor. Exodus didn't respond, instead opting to just wait for his ghost. When he was on board his ship, he jumped into the pilot's seat and switched to manual flying, pushing the galliot to full speed at the press of a button. Curvis continued to fly in silence, watching the radars intently. Exodus and Calise had just broken from formation to attack the enemy ships behind them, leaving him to guide the Guardian's vehicles to the destination. It seemed that the two other members of his fire team were successful in eliminating them as the dots on the screens moved out of sensor range. When it was clear they were no longer being followed, the Titan rested back, shifting full control of the ship to his ghost. The ponies behind him didn't say much, what with them being used to what had happened over the last day. His passengers were the ponies they considered closer allies, those being Breeze, Lemon, and Chrome. Cobalt had been ordered to stay back at the main camp, and so had reluctantly remained with his army. The Vienna was, unfortunately, not a very large ship, and carrying any more than those three would have been dangerous. So the majority of ponies stayed with Exodus and Calise. "Ghost, how long will it take for us to reach the town?" Curvis asked. Around 20 minutes, give or take." "Good. We shouldn't have too much trouble then." That was all that needed to be said. The trio behind him settled down at their own paces, ending up dozing off with the gentle heat and vibration of the engines. When the town came within sensor range, Curvis called out to the ponies behind him. "Hey guys, wake up. We're nearly there. Chrome, I'm gonna need some help organizing the mages. Not entirely sure how to command a large amount of people." "No problem," the unicorn muttered, stretching and standing up. His sleep earlier had made it much easier to wake now, leaving him feeling fully refreshed. The sounds of the engines dulled out as the Vienna slowed, turning slightly to move to a suitable landing zone near the outskirts of the town. Finding space for his own ship was easy, but finding space for crafts as large as a galliot was more of a challenge. It wasn't enormous, but its lack of landing capability made it difficult to move. There wasn't any issue in the end, thankfully. The ponies were moved from the ship safely, the Inquisitor and galliot flying away to recover their pilots. The Vienna stayed grounded to wait for Curvis, as he saw no reason to send it to orbit. When all the mages were accounted for, their leader trotted up to him, smiling a happy smile. "I would like to thank you for the trip. I assume your partners are well?" "I'm not sure right now. They left to deal with the Cabal, but should be back soon," Curvis responded, looking down at the road pony. "I see. In the meantime, I would like to welcome you to our town. This place is a safe haven for any pony, mage or not." "I appreciate that. We won't be staying long. But we may return here if you would be all right with that." The pony's smile grew even wider at that. "Of course. You are more than welcome to stay as long as you need. You have already proven to be an ally, and so our doors are open to you." The Titan gave a nod of thanks to her, watching her as she led the other mages into the town. When they had all left, he started to walk in after them, deliberately taking a different path to explore a bit. The ponies that lived there were a bit anxious, but didn't show fear to him walking through their town. Many simply gave a passing glance and went on their way. Eventually, he came across a rather large building. The sign outside pointed to it being a local bar, though it was written in a language he didn't fully understand. It looked like a long dead language he had seen glimpses of on Earth, though he couldn't be sure. Needing a way to waste some time while his fire team came back, he walked in. The smell of alcohol made its way past his air filters, bringing up memories of past times he had spent in the city. He walked over to the bar, ignoring any conversations around him. The ponies in the building were either not bothered by his presence or were too drunk to care. "You are the one they are talking about? The one from Manhattan?" the bartender asked while he sat on a stool. "Not quite sure I follow," Curvis said, cocking his head slightly. "Heard some stories from the ponies that fled the city. Apparently, a single being took on an entire army of those monsters and walked away unharmed." The human chuckled at that. "There were actually 3 of us. But it would be understandable that I was the one that attracted the most attention. Regardless, we all are thankful to the lives that you 3 saved, even if it wasn't many. Here," he said, sliding a mug of liquid over. "Apple family cider. Good stuff." "I'm afraid I don't have any money to pay you with," Curvis said, looking down at the drink. "On the house. If you 3 need anything, you're welcome to come to us." He looked at the pony in surprise before giving a nod and removing his helmet and setting it down beside the mug. It had been a while since he had taken it off. The feeling of a gentle breeze was far nicer now that he could actually feel it. Taking a sip of the cool cider, he leaned forward a little, resting his arms on the bar. It was times like that which made him truly appreciate the work he did. Being able to come to a bar after a long day of work was one of the best rewards he was able to receive. And he was going to make use of it every time it came around. And this was chapter 11 to Fireteam Odium, written by Atranos the Last. As per usual, I'm sorry for any mistakes I made, every pony. Though, as I said, I do it for all of you. If it can make any of you laugh, then I'm happy to make a lot of mistakes. Even though I really don't want to do it too often. And I guess you might be curious as to why my voice may sound a little different for this recording. Well, to tell you the truth, I used a small milk crate around my mic and put foam padding in the back and on the sides. I wanted to put some on the top and bottom, but then my mic wouldn't even be able to get into the milk crate or would be too cramped. So I settled for just having it on the back and on the sides. And upon listening to it again, it sounds like it worked perfectly. Though I did order a proper sound box, and once that comes, I will start using that. Every pony, I do hope you enjoyed this and look forward to more readings. I am Lotus Moon, and I want to wish you all a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night wherever you are, every pony. Good night.